Leadership is not about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about alignment, awareness, heart, and grit. I'm Tammy Ebright, leadership strategist, and this is Unleash Your Amazing Leadership. Join me as I chat with leaders who are evolving, growing, and creating real impact on purpose. Each week, you'll hear stories that inspire, challenge, and remind you of who you are. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Unleash Your Amazing Leadership. Today, my special guest is Cristina Sacco. Cristina is a dynamic brand marketing leader with over 15 years of experience crafting and executing go-to-market strategies. I actually met her about 6 years ago when she was working on a new brand launch for a company, and I was very impressed with her back then, but I have been watching her smart and pretty leadership lessons essentially on LinkedIn. And she's challenging stereotypes and sparking fresh conversations about authenticity, leadership, and the intersection of personal and professional branding. Welcome, Cristina.
Thank you.
Thank you
Here.
for joining me. And I know that I kind of messaged you a little bit about this, but I was really curious on how Smart and Pretty began.
Oh gosh. Well, it started off as a flippant comment, believe it or not. Earlier in my career, I was underestimated. I was brushed over. I was passed over. I was taken advantage of,
Mm,
mostly because I was a young, attractive woman. I know that. I have a bubbly personality. So,
mm,
I'm like always laughing, smiling, which is a great compliment to get. But I think the flip side of that sometimes is that people don't take you too seriously.
mm,
I was in positions where I had, let's say, submitted a recommendation over to my supervisor. Well, quickly after that, I was let go um, as a consultant because she felt threatened. So things like that were happened to me, and I would just say, smart and pretty, smart and pretty. And then it became an ongoing joke when you refer to that the brand launch that you and I met each other on. I was working with a different consultant. I used to make this joke all the time, smart and pretty. And man, we would laugh because anytime something ludicrous would happen, it was, well, you're smart and pretty. So and sometimes I would joke about it even in my personal life. I'd be like, well, I'm, just smart and pretty. That being said, this kind of leads to the more serious side of it, which was as I was developing a personal brand, I'm like, what do I want this to be? And I really had leaned into a lot of like inner work,
mm,
energetic work, like how I balance myself as a woman. And a lot of that really comes down to fully integrating all parts of yourself. You don't have to be just pretty or just smart. You can be smart and pretty. This is more geared towards women, but I think a lot of times with the stereotypes that are just in our society, like just generally speaking, like you play a part, right? Like if you're beautiful, you can't possibly be smart. If you're smart, you can't possibly be beautiful. You see this archetype in movies all the time. Like, you all of a sudden this woman, her glasses are taken off and she's this beautiful woman, but before she was this ugly duckling. Like the pair of glasses didn't change her.
right?
It
Yeah.
just helped her vision. So, we get a lot of that. And that's messaged to us and it's part of our upbringing.
Mm,
So the message really is how can we integrate all parts of ourselves and not just smart and pretty, but the more serious analytical side, yes, but also the fun, flirtatious, easygoing sides of us that we all have, men and women, and bringing it together so that you're showing up authentically.
I think that's beautiful. Also have struggled with that all my life, and I never thought of it as smart and pretty until actually somebody that we both know said, "Oh, I forget you're smart and pretty," and I was like, "Huh, that's weird." And then when I saw your messaging, I was like, "Oh, okay, I've heard that before." And I had never, but also minimized, never taken seriously. And I had this incredible leader at one of the last companies that I worked for outside of, my own business. And we were only knew each other over Zoom. And, I'm fun. I smile. I am probably even a little flirty. And he was like, "You don't mean anything by that, do you?" And I was like, "What?" He was like, "All that." And I was like, "Nope, I don't. I'm just friendly." And the friendliness, along with being smart and pretty, I think can be really challenging sometimes for women because they may not be taken as seriously, but then also it can also be a secret weapon.
Yes. And, there's been lots of studies done on that where you can, as a woman, say things to other men in the workplace that other men wouldn't get away with. Because, when men get together, just the way they communicate, it can be very competitive. And certain things that I can say that are very direct
Mhm.
are not seen as confrontational because it's coming from me. And I usually come from a place of softness, but authenticity. So if a young male professional were to say that to somebody like the CEO,
Mhm.
right, the same exact thing, it may not be accepted the same way. So I do have certain advantages, and this is not to be sexual in any way, just because women were softer, we can say certain things without it being so threatening,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And one thing that I've learned is it's something that I've had to flip. You might relate to this, but it used to be that I was harder externally in certain instances, but I was very soft inside. But that's completely flipped because I've done a lot of work where I can be more authentic. I'm much softer on the outside, but very strong on the inside. And I
Mhm.
think as a woman, that's key because when you have that softness, you're quite magnetic. Um, you're a little bit more in touch with your feminine energy, which is, you know, there's a bell curve here. I'm not speaking to everybody, but generally speaking, most women are more in touch with that aspect of themselves. We have both,
Mhm.
masculine and feminine energy within us, and we always are going back and forth between them. But if your resting state is sitting on the feminine, you're going to be a lot more at ease, a lot more relaxed. And when you're not trying to force outcomes, when you're not trying to make things happen, you face a lot less resistance. And so for me, having that softness on the outside and being strong on the inside has really helped propel me forward because I'm not fighting so much. When I was in that like feeling of fighting or there was a lot of resistance, it becomes very difficult, especially when you have goals. It's very taxing emotionally.
Mhm.
Um, and other people feel that and it almost like repels what you want, right? So we're speaking energetically here, but that's how I've approached my leadership style actually is just getting more in touch with what feels like ease to me.
Mhm.
For me, that is getting in touch where my feminine energy is so that I can be soft on the outside, strong on the inside. Strong boundaries, of course. Always have my values. I know what my values are, and I operate from those values, but in a softer way. I'm
Mhm.
not forcing the outcome anymore.
Yes, more of a flow, like
Yes,
the
a
people
flow.
attracting, and then it's up to me or up to you to be discerning on which opportunities are correct for you. And I don't think that I always knew that. I too forced a lot of things, and I had a lot of success with some of that force,
Uh-huh.
but it never ended well.
Yes. It's a quick win sometimes. It's true. It's true. And, the more self-aware you are, the more in touch you are with what your values are, it's much easier for you to discern what's the right opportunity and what's not. And you translate that over to business, to partnerships, to relationships. Things really start to flow because you'll have true alignment. And when you have alignment, you'll have success. It's not just a transaction.
Mm, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So you have built an amazing brand of your own, but also while helping other people build their brand. And I seen something about like you blending creative vision with business goals. How does that look in action? Can you share an example?
I currently work for an executive recruiting firm, and I have somebody who reports to me. And when I came in, I saw that there was no strategic direction, both for the department or for this individual. So I would say he's probably one of my biggest success stories because yeah. Once I found alignment for him, so I set the strategy, I created the framework,
Mhm.
and I also got to understand what made him tick, what he liked and didn't like. I didn't make him do things he didn't want to do. Instead, I had him lean into the things that he was good at and that he liked.
Mm.
And since then, his personal brand has taken off tremendously. Like he's making six figures this year on his own separate brand, aside from his day job.
Mm.
So he's built a name for himself. I've seen his confidence go up. I've seen him, he started to work out. He's planning for a half marathon. Um, Nothing has made me feel happier
Mm.
than seeing his success because when you're able to find somebody's passion and find where they sit the best, and that takes some creative thinking and solutions, you just see them unleash, like you just it's like tapping that geyser and it just, you know, it goes forth. And then also just professionally, like when I consulted, as you know, for quite a few years, and just getting to understand like the business needs and figuring out how best to meet them, and where their efforts would be best aligned to where they want to go. Because, there's a lot of noise, especially in marketing,
Mm.
and everybody's a marketer. They're all like, I'm a consumer, so I know how to market. Well, not exactly, but that's where I could bring some expertise. But, for instance, this is something I heard a lot as a consultant. Like, we need to be on social. And I was like, well, do you really? Like,
Mm.
yeah, that might work for some places and that might be a great channel, but is that really going to work for you? Can you keep up with it consistently? And are you going to be able to engage with your customers in a meaningful way? There might be a different way that's better. Just helping them find that direction was always a challenge, but it was like a rewarding challenge for me, especially, in the services based world that we're in, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I think also creativity comes with when there's a lot of constraints. So I've had to work with budgetary and resource constraints in every company I've ever consulted for, every company I've ever worked for. And I got quite adept at doing a lot with a little.
Mm. Very
Uh,
resourceful.
Finding the biggest impact, yes. And I think those parameters actually make you better because if you have this huge budget with basically, all the resources, doesn't you're not being very creative, right? Like you can kind of do all the things and then something will move the needle and it's not the wrong decision necessarily, but when you start putting constraints on it, um, you get to see really how creative you can be. So that's always been a part of my job that I enjoyed. As much as sometimes I'm like, I wish I had a bigger budget or I wish I had more resources or whatever it was at the time. I look back on it and I was like, wow, I really moved the needle with, you know, not a lot.
Mm. And that's
Yeah.
such a fulfilling thing to look back and see the impact that you're making, especially when it's with a smaller budget or even with a large budget, but just to be able to look back and see the impact and how things have grown.
Oh, yeah.
When a leader is thinking about their branding, do you have any suggestions for them?
This is where I would put my marketing expertise into play. So, what's your objective and who's your target audience? If you're not reaching your audience, it doesn't matter what you say,
Mhm.
it's not going to resonate. So, if you at least have a strategic direction, your audience is going to tell you what they like and don't like very quickly, especially on social. That's the best thing you can do is just put it out there and see what happens, see what resonates. And you'll see very quickly, like, people are engaging, both positive and negative. Sometimes, like for me, and I'll share this with you, I don't get likes. I don't get direct engagement. I don't get a ton of comments, but you've been seeing my content and you reached out to me. So sometimes you put things out there into the ether and you're not quite sure if it's resonating. And then you start getting these opportunities coming your way. So my second piece of advice would be say yes in the beginning to a lot of things. Understand what's going to work and what's not going to work. You can only do it once, and that's fine, especially with your personal brand. You'll know very quickly if it's aligned or not. And then I would say the third thing too is so know your audience, be open to opportunities, say yes, but also make quick decisions, right? So if it doesn't work, like don't torture yourself. It's not the end of the world. I think we're perfectionists, right? Especially when it comes to your personal brand. You're like, I want it to be exactly right. You hear that a lot, and people are afraid to move forward. But anytime you see like a podcast that's had their podcast up from day one, before they had a studio, the sound is bad, their guests are not that great, they're not that great of a host. Um, you see the progression. We always see the success, right? We always see like this is successful and look how great it is. It doesn't start that way. So the best advice is just start too. Don't worry so much about perfection. The internet is quite forgiving, and our feed is so busy that, I mean, it's a blip. Even if it was like the worst post you ever did, they're not going to remember it. We feel it because we're self-conscious, but most people aren't going to remember it. So just keep going.
Yes, I love that. I love that. Just start, because I think that that's so important. I talk to my coaching clients a lot about their visibility, and a lot of people really overanalyze putting anything out there, and we are so distracted that sometimes you have to have a little bit of a presence to where people are seeing it. And maybe you would disagree because you said earlier that not everybody needs social media, but outside salespeople who work with a lot of realtors that are on social, like sometimes like having that visibility where you're showing up in their feed, even if it's like just weekly, could be super helpful.
Yes, I do agree with that. I think what I was referring to is with brands is they're like, I need to have Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, X, they had the gamut, TikTok, but they're like an investor group. No, you need like LinkedIn and X. Your consumers and your target audience is not on Instagram, right? There's They could be, but you're probably going to find more of them on X and LinkedIn, right? So that's what I meant by that. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. Most people are not ready to buy when we're speaking about brand awareness, and that's the marketer's job, right? Like knowing that you're even just out there as an option. When you are ready to buy, where do you go?
Right. Yes.
Right?
Start
It's
falling in love with the idea before it's even in your own realm of
exactly,
wanting.
exactly. And you see this person all the time. You're like, oh, I think they talk about that. Then they'll go back, right? But it's always about staying top of mind and staying visible. I like that. It's good advice.
I like what you said about being intentional, not spreading yourself too thin, about trying to be in all the places all the time. And because that can be very taxing. And if you only have so much energy to put towards it, you can get very overwhelmed quickly. How would you advise somebody on do they want to put their time on social media?
It depends on the industry, but you want to go where your target audience is.
Mhm.
And I would also say if you can be consistent, that's the best thing. Because the worst thing for a brand, whether it's a company or a person, is to have a channel that's open and there's no content on it. It
Mm,
looks as if it's unfinished, there's a lack of care. You never want to present yourself to the world like that because if you can't even keep up with your own social, how are you going to keep up with their business? right? So that's something I see a lot of people make mistakes on, both from a brand and a personal brand perspective, is they want to do all the things and they think they have to be there. The key, I think, is consistency and just consistently showing up in people's inboxes, on their feeds. As long as you can stay consistent with it, which is the hardest thing to do, I think you'll have success, right? Because it's a slow build. To your point, they keep seeing it until they're ready. And then they're like, oh, I always see this person. Let me
Mhm.
reach out to them.
Yes.
Yeah.
What are some common mistakes that companies do in their like go to market strategy? Maybe from what I'm hearing you say, not having a strategy is maybe one of the worst things.
Yes, that, and believe it or not, a lot of companies are make very reactive and emotional decisions.
Mm.
So they might be reacting to the market as it stands today. We're seeing a lot of that volatility right now across industries, with everything that's going on in the socioeconomic world, everything that's going on in the political world. It's affecting businesses. So how do you remain strategic and non-reactive? By having a clear goal in sight, understanding where the company is going. You will always have challenges, and you will have to adjust, right? But the long-term vision has to be there. And so if you're choosing growth, for instance, do you want to cut back on your marketing and sales investments just because times are tough? Well, a lot of people do that. But then what happens is you lose your best people to competition.
Mm.
Business, you saw it happen during COVID. All of a sudden it goes up and they need people to meet it, right? But those people are haven't snapped up by competitors, right? Because they were wise enough to hire that top talent when there was no competition. Or they were wise enough to not turn off their marketing efforts. So when everybody else is dying down, the competition is going down, that's your time to strike. And it's a hard decision to make when your margins are getting
Mm.
smaller and smaller, your profitability is being squeezed, your your board is putting pressure on you to keep profitability up. And usually what happens is marketing gets cut, teams get cut, right? This is very reactive. Now, sometimes it is the right thing to do, but instead of cutting, 30%, maybe you cut 10%, right?
Mhm.
This is where you have to be more strategic, but not reacting to what's happening is going to keep you successful. I mean, we have businesses that have been around like Coca-Cola for hundreds of years. They've been through it all.
Yes.
How have they survived? And they are steady pumping out advertising, marketing. They've kept their teams pretty much intact. Of course, there's been changes over the years. I'm just using them as an example because they've been around for over 100 years. But you can do that when you've got a long-term vision and you're not so focused on making the stakeholders happy. So I see this happen a lot with the C-suite, and I get it. There's a lot of pressure for them to stay profitable and to grow each quarter. But when you're always looking at profitability for just the next quarter, sometimes you cut the spending that's needed for the long-term growth. Or you cut, I saw it in medical devices too. We had an innovation team that was looking at the market 10 and 15 years from now. They were doing stuff that wasn't even on the market yet, but would be. It costs a lot of money. Google, my friend worked for Google. This was in 2012. I was wearing the first prototype for Google glasses, and I saw the driverless cars around the campus. That's how long they were working on this. That's not a cheap endeavor.
Mm-mm.
And there isn't a market for it yet. But when there is a market, or when you create a market for it, um, you're first, right? You create the category. So you see a lot of that hesitation. Not every company can do it, but you don't want to be reactive, I think, as a leader. That's, I think, the key.
Yes. More intentional, um, and authentic, hopefully, to who you
Yes.
are versus, pretending to be something else. And I just don't think that's very sustainable.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So why do you think that, or I guess I should say, do you think everybody should have a personal brand?
Yes.
And why do you say that? I
Um,
agree with you, but why?
yes, I think, oh gosh. Well, we're in a very noisy world.
Mhm.
I think this has been true as a marketer, but I would say even more so for any professional now. You want to have a personal brand because it's a noisy marketplace. You've got automations, you have AI, you have all of these. Like if you're applying for a job, for instance, right? It's going through an ATS, it's searching for keywords. You may never speak to a person.
Mm,
And this is just a good way for you to reach many, right? So instead of one to one, it's one to many. In addition to that, I think it keeps you sharp, right? So you're always looking to grow, you're always growing your network. And I think that if you're able to differentiate yourself in the marketplace, uh, let's say a leader has all the technical,
mm,
criteria, and that's your competition, let's say, for a role. um, this will just show a lot more of who you are as a leader authentically, right? Because you have this personal brand. And being a thought leader in your space, it carries a lot of credibility. If a lot of people respect what you have to say, look at Tony Robbins, you just need to say his name and like he could tell you anything. You'd be like, "Yep, let's do it." Why? Because he has built his credibility in his industry and in the marketplace. You always want to do that. Brands have been doing this forever. You
mm,
know, I love the example of Michelin star. So this is to me the most prized example of thought leadership. They have made tires, right? This is, they made tires. You don't need to replace tires all that often, right?
mm,
So how do you encourage people to create more wear and tear? Well, they used to have the Michelin guide. And on it, they would put the top restaurants along these routes. And this is where the Michelin star was born. So you can thank rubber tires for these Michelin star restaurants because they wanted to encourage people to use their tires more. So they didn't sell you tires, they sold you an experience, and
mm,
they were thought leaders in the sense of this is the best place to go. Here's how you can find it. It's a whole guide. People loved it. And people use these guides and they use their tires more.
mm.
So they added value without a hard sale and they got business from it, right? And the Michelin star was born. So to me, I thought that was genius.
That's cool. I
Um,
didn't know. Yes.
yeah, it's amazing. You can read more about it. I'm sure there's a ton online about this, but that's the power that you can have as a thought leader.
My dad is a big Michelin tires fan for sure. All of his tires are always Michelin. So I'll have to ask him. You know this?
The Michelin star.
Yes.
Yes.
So you have led companies through like mergers and acquisitions. How do you navigate the challenges of brand integration during times of big change?
Yeah. So most of the mergers and acquisitions I have gone through were actually total rebrands, amicable, because it was based on the type of merger. So quite a few of them were wanted. So the CEO, I'll speak about one case for a medical device company. He wanted to be acquired so that we had more global reach, so that we had more cash infusion. It allowed us to purchase our rented manufacturing facilities that were residing in Fort Lauderdale 100%. So he did this as a strategic move for cash infusion and also to get access to a different type of medical device that we weren't in market for. So, in that instance, it was a lot easier because everybody was on board and they wanted they wanted to be acquired, and we were happy to change our name because we wanted the name of the more established brand that was global.
Mm,
In other cases, the case that you and I were talking about, where I consulted, it was a long-standing brand. There was a rebrand. It wasn't an acquisition. At one point, there was an acquisition, but losing that brand name was there was a big fight. There was a big internal fight over that and what that would be for brand equity. In the end, it really came down to the business needs and navigating the internal folks and putting their fears aside, that
mm,
this was going to be a good thing, not a bad thing, and backing it up with data. So the fear was that that brand recognition would go away. It had been around for 35 years. It was the initial brand before the secondary brand. There was all these things that were happening, which were legit. But once you started to dig into the data, the brand equity wasn't there like they thought. We were able to start fresh with more valuable and more targeted audience members and marketing. And we also gave a very long transition time where we teased the market a bit and also let them know that this change was coming so that we weren't, losing some of our best customers, or it wasn't too jarring. I mean, you just saw this with Cracker Barrel.
mm, mhm,
Huge misfire, and they were very upset. But I think, and I don't know a lot about this one, I have to look into it further, but communication is always key with your customers. So when you talk about these mergers and acquisitions, maybe changing a brand name, it's all about communicating internally and externally. So you want to have it always feels like almost too much, like you're over communicating, but usually it's never enough.
mm,
Um, Tons of internal communications, sharing what's happening with your internal team. Does this mean I'm going to lose my job? That's always the first thing that happens. They wonder, like, am I going to have a job when we merge? When we get acquired, are they going to cut everybody? These are legit fears. And I think as a leadership team, you need to address them head on
mm, mhm,
and
mhm,
give very clear, answers. And if you don't know, say, we're still working on these things and we will give you an update. So town halls, internal communication, leadership meetings where, you have breakouts, um, lunch and learns. I've had to execute all of that, and it really puts people at ease and helps them become aligned with the change. Externally, you want to do the same thing with your customers. So we just talked about the one example of giving a lot of lead time, like this change is happening. Here's what it means for you. Usually, it's a good thing. People don't like change, though. They always
mm.
they always resist it. And so you have to be very patient and have some empathy. I think having some empathy, both internally with your team members and externally with your customers, is key because people have fear, right? Like,
Mm,
what does this mean for my business? What does this mean for my job? What does this mean for my family? Ultimately, it comes down to your family, right? You lose your best vendor, or you get cut as a vendor. Okay, that's your livelihood. I'm a team member. I might lose my job with this merger, this acquisition. So you always want to address that. And
yeah.
of course, take them along on the journey. Don't just surprise them like 2 weeks before something major happens. Give them a heads up as much as you can. Sometimes you can't share everything, but as early as you can and as much as you can, share it because it puts a lot of people's fears at ease. And that's where you'll get better alignment because they won't be so reactive and they're not going to be coming out of a place of fear.
Yeah, so I love communication is key. And what I'm hearing you say is it's like transparent communication and pulling the people, like making sure that you're not just sprinkling this out on, for the external places, but really getting buy-in inside by making it exciting and fun for your team members as you're going through this and helping to alleviate their fears.
Yes. Yes. As a marketer, always say my number one audience is always my team,
Mm,
the internal team, because they will be your biggest brand ambassador. They will be your biggest ally, and they will work the hardest for you when you need them to. Your clients aren't going to do that. as much as we love our clients and our partners and we have great partnerships, right, in business, if you can align your team, the rest follows because they'll give that great service. So you'll have those repeat clients coming back and you'll also have the alignment. And to your point, just having that transparency with them and bringing them along on the journey is really going to help get you to where you want to be.
Yes. So, what does unleash your amazing leadership mean to you?
This is one that I thought very thoughtfully about. Um, I think it just means to lead from a place of authenticity. So if you can be self-aware enough and brave enough to look inside to see where those shadow parts of you are and face them head on,
Mm-hmm.
which most people are not willing to do, you'll find that life becomes much easier. And so facing that inner demon, that inner critic, that whatever it is, that shadow that you have,
That
will
inner reactive.
that reactivity always comes from that place, then you will find a lot more inner peace. And that will put you in a place where you can lead authentically. Unleash your amazing is really about, really looking inward and
Mm,
doing that work to make sure you get there, you're centered. And if you are a leader, you owe that to everybody who you're leading, right? They need somebody who's centered, who knows who they are, and
mm,
who can lead from a place of authenticity, because that's where the stability is going to come from.
mm. Yeah, because people know who you are even when you don't. People
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
your energy before you show up. So you want to be aware of what you're putting out there, what your energy is, and are you really aligned with who you are, or are you so conditioned that you think you have to act this way instead of being your true self?
Yes. And I think hopefully the older we get, the closer we are to that authentic self. As a mother, I've tried to teach this to my daughter so that she can just get there faster.
Yes.
I'm like, just skip the hairy parts. I'm gonna cut to the chase. This is what you need to do.
Mhm.
Um, and if they make some mistakes, just a lot of times I'm like, hey, it took me till now to figure it out. You're fine.
Yes, I tell
You're
myself,
way ahead of the game. You're way ahead of the game.
yeah, you have many, many years to figure it all out. It's okay that you don't know yet. It's okay.
Yeah. But I will say the faster you can get there, man, that's when you can unleash your amazing.
Mm-hmm. Is there any like leadership lessons that it took you a while to learn, but you now wish that you knew way back when?
Yeah, we alluded to that earlier. So just getting in touch for me as a woman with my feminine energy, which just in a nutshell is to be more receiving.
Yeah.
So a little bit more ease, a little bit more flow. I was in a place where I was, fixing, moving, leaning forward, driving, which is very masculine energy and it does have a time and a place. But if I'm in that too much, it starts to force things. And so what that looks like in the professional world is you're trying to force an outcome. So you've got a client that you're trying to get, and it's for whatever reason, it's just not working. And you're just trying to close this deal. Let it go. Just let it go. It's usually if there's no alignment, there's a reason, right? And those people that I forced to close as a client, they never work out.
Mhm.
They never work out, right? You can
Yes.
also do that in hiring, right? So you hire this person, they've got this great resume, and you just want it to work so badly, but they're not a value fit. And so you're trying to force it. And inevitably it creates you know, a misalignment on the team. You start to affect high performing team members or the good team members that you have because you're just forcing this person who doesn't fit to be, just want to force this outcome. You just want it to be. So I would say for me as a leader, learning how to let go, because I'm a passionate person. I want, even team members where they're not performing. I'm like, I want them to drive so hard and be as passionate as me. And, they're not, that's not who they are. And I
Mm,
just had to let that go because I was exerting so much energy on focusing on what they weren't doing. And as a leader, that's like the worst thing that you can do because they start to feel, like you said, that energy and they clam up and it almost gives you the opposite effect. You can become a micromanager. You can make all these mistakes, because you're trying to force the outcome. So,
mm,
just letting go, letting go, letting it, letting it happen the way it's going to happen. Usually that works out better than when you're trying to force it.
yes.
Mhm.
I think it's getting to know them, understand them, and then figuring out how they're motivated versus taking our preconceived sales training. This is what I learned at this place 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Like, this is the way you lead. But really, we're each, like, everybody is a leader, but sometimes we haven't stepped into that leadership part of who we are. And I think a big part of that is understanding others. Understanding ourselves first is where that self-awareness, emotional intelligence comes in. But understanding others is that other piece of EQ that so many leaders, I think sometimes they really misunderstand where things are coming from, and they have their own, they make up stories in their head on, oh, this person is doing this because they're disrespectful, or, they don't believe in the brand. But it really could be that it's just a misunderstanding. And so I think it's important to ask great questions, get one to one with people so that they can really, you can get to know them and then lead them in a way that empowers them to be their best self.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And then a lot of leaders, especially, and I'll say this, in your masculine energy, you're leaning in. So
Mm,
you're almost giving them the answers. But I find the best way to coach is to let them answer the question. So what's working? What's not working? Let them answer. Don't give them the answers, guide them. You can certainly make recommendations, but have them come to you with the solutions. And
mm,
then you can help guide them, but also understanding, like you said, asking those questions like, well, why do you think that is?
mm.
Did something personal happen that this isn't going so well? Right? We're not just professionals, right? Like if things aren't going well at home, usually it translates over to work and vice versa, right? So um, I think asking questions and allowing them to answer, not answering for them, really uncovers a lot. So being a good listener.
Mm. Which is
And
a skill a lot of us had to develop. It's not something we're really taught.
yeah. And you want to, you know, if you're a leader, it's like you just want them to get there quickly. Sometimes you're just like, I know what the answer is. Just do this, but that's not helpful. And that's not how people learn, by the way.
Mm. It is not.
They have to work through it. They have to figure it out themselves. And you can certainly give guidance, but if you have that open communication too, that as soon as something is going off, they should be coming to you. And I think that's a good litmus test too. Like, I am not with every little problem, but like, hey, I'm feeling stuck here. Like, here's the things I'm looking at. I could use some guidance. They feel open enough to come to you as their boss and say, I'm a little stuck here, means that you have a really good rapport. Because if you're afraid of your boss, you're not going to do that because you're gonna be afraid of looking like you're incompetent, right?
Yes.
So, not every little problem, but some of the bigger stuff, they should be coming to you. That's what you're there for.
Yeah, create that trust and that safety that they
Yeah.
feel, that that you'll hold the space for whatever it is and help them work through it. So for yourself, looking ahead, what's next for you in your career, your thought leadership?
Well, That is an interesting question. Because we're talking about all this vision.
Yeah.
So, an exercise that I like to employ, and I've been employing for about the past year, is really focusing on uh, how I want my life to look
Mhm.
and embodying that feeling of what it's going to feel like as if it's happening in the present. So that's been very powerful for me because I've been able to start taking action now that helps me lead towards feeling that way.
Mhm.
So some of those goals were, to buy a house in a different country and, maybe own a business of my own, maybe own a coaching business, right? So the ideas haven't fully come to fruition, but most definitely want to lean more into Smart and Pretty because I find that it is resonating. I spoke to somebody in my network not too long ago who was, she's like, I felt really good after speaking to you. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. Such a good feeling.
Yes.
It-
Yeah.
yeah, it could be that, it could be that. But for now, I think I just want to spark the conversation. And not to digress too much, but it, even though I am leaning in towards my feminine energy and I'm, speaking to a lot of women, or maybe that message resonates, it actually came from a place of like, what's happening to men right now in our society. Um, as a strong woman, I need a strong man. And, society is really making it difficult. Boys are falling behind in education. Um, they're falling behind in the workforce. So how do we get balance back, right? Um, for me, I think it comes down to polarity.
Mhm.
So if you are a strong woman, centered in that energy, I think that will ignite that polarity to help bring that balance back. So this message is really for men and women.
Mhm.
Um, how do you get centered with yourself? How do you get in touch with that? And I think we'll feel a lot better, as individuals and as society too. So, I mean, that's where I'd like it to go. I'd like to have more conversations about what's happening with men and women, in society in general, not just the workplace, and how we can help each other, right? How
Yeah.
do we get in touch with
Yes.
that? Yeah.
Yeah. So, get that whole duality, right? Where, sometimes we're like either completely in our shadow or in completely in our wisdom. But if we're kind of more in that middle, then it gives space for other people to be, to learn both, but also then to come to the center so that they can lead a healthier, well-rounded life. I would love to see more, more women and men in their own, masculinity, femininity, whatever it is right for them.
Hmm.
And again, in human design, it actually maps out our traits and it shows which traits are more masculine and more feminine. And mine, like I'm like more 75, my traits are more 75% masculine. So
Yeah.
truly that is like leaning into my feminine energy is has to be more intentional.
Yeah.
It's not naturally something that comes to me. And I was just thinking where you were talking about it earlier that I guess that could even be when somebody asks to help you with your groceries or things and I'm like, "Oh, I got it." Or I go to the farm and home store because we live on a farm now and I'm carrying these big food bags and things. And they're like, would you like some? Oh, no, I got it. So, like, receiving to me, what I hear you say is, Tammy, you have to allow people to help you and receive. Just because you can doesn't mean you have to.
Exactly. And I think as women in particular, you you can inspire that, and it can be quite magnetic too. And it's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that you're incapable. Um, Going back to masculine and feminine energy, we all have that inside of us. It's not tied to gender. So I just want to be clear there. But like you said, feminine is more receiving, masculine is more action oriented. So, being able to flow in and out of those states within a day or within a given moment, you'll see a lot more ease in your life. So, yes, you could carry those heavy grocery bags, but if somebody can help you carry that load, why would you? So, why put it on yourself? It's just really as simple as that. I mean, I
This
was
is just a
going through
simple way of receiving, right? If
yeah,
we
very,
love ourselves.
very. Yeah, it could be something as simple as a compliment, men and women, they have a hard time accepting compliments, but my gosh, you know, when somebody takes the time, especially a leader, to compliment you and say, hey, you're doing really great work, that goes a long way. It goes
Mhm.
a long way, especially if there's a few layers between you as a leader and let's say somebody who's junior on the team, like that shows that I see you, that um, I care about what you're doing and what you're doing is making an impact, right? Everybody wants to be noticed, receive that compliment. I think it's good for everybody, you know.
Mm. Yes, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me and all your wisdom. It's been really nice catching up and hearing more about what's been going on in your life. How would people get a hold of you if they wanted to like learn more?
They can reach me on LinkedIn, so they can find me at Cristina Sacco. Um, you can probably put a link to my LinkedIn
Mhm.
after we publish this. So go ahead, send me an email. I'd love to chat. And Tammy, it's been such a pleasure. I love speaking with you. It's such a good time catching up.
Very much, very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Unleash Your Amazing Leadership. If this episode resonated, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss what's next. Want more support or curious about working together? Visit unleashyouramazing.com to explore coaching, workshops, and ways to connect. Until next time, keep showing up and unleashing your amazing.